Well, hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. So, another Criterion essential modern classic ticked off with today's film. That is Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood. It's tricky with a modern classic of this nature, or a director who is incredibly well lauded in critical circles, because there are two levels, I suppose. There is the artistic appreciation of one's style and the way that they embrace and adapt the filmmaking process to enhance the cinematic experience, whilst also just the superficial enjoyment of a film. Because I think the problem that I have, well, there are supposed to be two sections to this. And this is me putting my hands up in both of these situations. One, I have not seen enough Paul Thomas Anderson films. I just haven't. I've only, this is technically my second one. And the second thing is, I don't think his style, I appreciate intellectually his style, but I don't think creatively it necessarily appeals to me. And I can sit there and go, oh yes, this is beautifully done, this shot, this style of filmmaking, this style of storytelling, this character work. But I genuinely have struggled previously with the last Paul Thomas Anderson film I saw. And this one, though better, I had the same feelings with. So the last film I saw, and my first experience, which was his last film released, was Phantom Thread. And I will make no bones about it, I hated Phantom Thread. I absolutely did not click with it one bit. I didn't enjoy the performances, I didn't enjoy the filmmaking. Again, intellectually, I appreciate the craftsmanship, but in terms of like a visceral experience, I absolutely found it mind-numbingly torturous. And I felt like I was in a room of people who I absolutely detested and didn't want to know a single thing about. Genuinely just didn't click with it. There Will Be Blood, I did get on a lot better with. And there are things I really do appreciate about it, and I want to talk a bit about Daniel Day-Lewis and his performance style and what he contributes to this. And like I say, the craftsmanship of the filmmaking. But I did want to start off from the off to say, look, I don't necessarily think it always appeals to me. And also, it does make me go back and kind of want to go, okay, would I have preferred his earlier works? But yeah, so the other thing I wanted to say about this from the off is the fact is with There Will Be Blood, this is a film that either you absolutely should see or you absolutely will never see. As in, at this stage, it's a film student's film. If you want to go into filmmaking or film analysis, you have to see There Will Be Blood. You have to see it because it's like, it's like a Citizen Kane level of, oh wow, this is incredibly important to see. But it's not the kind of thing I would recommend to someone who said, oh, what should I put on to watch? This isn't a go-to film. And so with that in mind, I'm not going to talk about it like I would a review for a new film. I've done a lot of new films recently and tried to stay spoiler-free and tried to talk about them more like reviews than analyses. I don't want to do that with this. And frankly, I'm considering changing my approach generally because I always want to be more analytical about the filmmaking process rather than just review films. That wasn't my intention for the channel. And so with this, I am going to jump in full spoilers with this. I want to talk about this across the entirety of the film and what I think it's going for, what the themes are, what the performances are trying to do, rather than trying to talk about it in oblique terms. So, I have to say to start off with that this definitely is a continuation of the Western story. In terms of its setting, is quite clearly, I suppose the next stage of the Western. If the Western genre was happening linearly, And we got all the way through the Spaghetti trilogy. We got all the way through to Shane, and we came to the end, the fall of the classic Western. You know, the time in which cowboys were gone and small towns were going from just about surviving to becoming prosperous. Historically speaking, we are now in that prospector stage, and yet this retains the hallmarks of a Western. There is something very Western about it. But this is a Western with no cowboys. This is a Western with no. It's not about criminals versus criminals and lawmen. This is about wealth, and it's almost like Citizen Kane by way of a Western, and the idea of prospering in a small town and advancing the town, but of course advancing yourself, and the sacrifices you make as a consequence to this, the poison that exists within the oil. And so the interesting thing about it, and everyone, there are certain things that, if you know anything about film, even before I've seen this, there are two things that everyone who has the smallest amount of interest in film know about. They know about the I've abandoned my child scene, the I've abandoned my child, I've abandoned my boy scene, and they know the I drink your milkshake, the I drink your milkshake scene. It's just, those are two scenes amongst the plethora of things that just come up. If clips of films are being played for a quiz, they are likely to want two examples of that film that will come up. And yet, like many of those kinds of scenes, you end up not fully appreciating the scale of it until you actually watch the film. Because, like I've said before, there is that nature of certain filmmaking works in terms of the sitting in the cinema experience. And if you take certain scenes and sequences out of context and just play them, you would play them for laughs. It's the Marriage Story issue where everyone was pointing at the Marriage Story scene of shouting at each other and saying, oh, isn't this over the top and melodramatic? But the point is, it works within the context of the film. And when you get to that emotional climax, you've done all the legwork to get there so that it's cathartic to have that explosion. And that's exactly the same with this. That both those scenes are catharsis. They are emotional, explosive representation of feeling. Because for the majority of the film, it's been about repression, not expressing, about people being very guarded and playing chess and talking in doublespeak and having that sense of, this is a very sort of people playing their cards close to their chest. Whereas those scenes represent, like I say, two moments, one in the middle and one at the end, where it's just this huge explosion of finally I can express. I have a context in which I can express my emotions, and so therefore I'm going to let them overwhelm me. This is definitely a film that is about. This is a Daniel Day-Lewis film, as in, yes, it's got a good supporting cast. Paul Dano's really good. The boy who plays the son is really good. But it's Daniel Day-Lewis. It is Daniel Day-Lewis, the performance. Because, when people, that's something else anyone who knows anything about this film talk about, is the fact that it has this 15-minute opening in complete silence as this guy desperately, practically with his hands, is digging for oil and nearly dies trying to just get a small amount of oil. And that obviously sets the stake up for the film, the basis of the film. This man who has gone to this level, this degree, has dug in the dirt to just get a little bit of oil to indicate the fact that this is supposed to be the time of prosperity. This is the time when, we've gone from communities and individuals barely scraping by, and this is sort of the birth of modern capitalism. This is the, and I'm sure I'm going to mention this a couple of times, the Citizen Kane, this is where these men are born from. This idea comes from this time period and this attitude where people were, like I say, digging in the dirt for a little bit of oil, because that little bit of oil could turn you into a captain of industry overnight. And that's essentially what we see. We see this guy going from nothing to being this, so the film has almost three stages to it: the rise, the prosperance, and the fall, or the decay, I suppose. And the whole point is this guy, once he's got this achievement, it's very much, he develops the wealth, and then it's about the status. And the rest of the film is about pride and about status and about the idea that you could be the richest man in the country, and yet you are still fighting powers and still having to humble yourself or humiliate yourself and making sacrifices. And of course, then also having people surrounding you who, can you trust, can you not? Watching yourself being slowly whittled away. And that's the arc of Daniel Day-Lewis. You watch him, he's not a good person from the off. He definitely does some really choice things early on. But you see the layers of character in him. You see the fact that he takes this child, this orphaned child, at his own... a child that is orphaned because of decisions that he made, and essentially adopt this child, and you think, okay, that's good. But then he adopts this child as a strategy, because he wants the child to essentially be the... it's like, oh, I'm a family man. It is simply just another method to make himself appealing to people. And that is his character from the off. He does do good things sometimes, but it's part of strategy. And the whole thing is he nothing he does is altruistic. That even the best decisions he makes is some kind of strategy. And again, like I say, it's about pride, and it's about the sense of, I suppose, the age of wealth going up against the former age of church, and it's that sort of, it replaced religion versus state, again with church versus state, with church versus enterprise, and of course you have Paul Dano who plays this priest, and it's them constantly trying to outmaneuver each other and humiliate. It's not just that they want to beat each other; it's they want to humiliate each other in some major way. And it's all about the power play between them. And like I say, everything is strategy. And so, as I say, when you get to I've abandoned my child climax, at that point, Daniel Day-Lewis has done... at that point, he has murdered the guy who pretended to be a long-lost brother. And, he sent his child away. He caused his child deafness, sent him away, and at this point he realises, and it allows him to express all the pain and trauma, even though he's doing it as a performance so he can get some more land, even though he's having to humiliate himself in front of the priest and allow the priest to, diminish him. It also, there is the authenticity to it. And that moment where it's like, oh, I finally get to represent all the pain that has been built inside of him. And then, of course, you get to the fall. Again, they call it the fall. It's not really a fall, because in the final act of the film, he's wealthy, successful. Okay, his relationship with his son has completely collapsed at this point. He's alone, and it's very Citizen Kane. I keep coming back to the Citizen Kane of it, because 1927... okay, it's a decade off from where Citizen Kane ends, but it's that same sense of a man alone in his wealthy mansion, and you get that sense of, he got all of this, what's it for? And the only thing I would say about that is that he does get what he wants, because it's quite clear that he's driven, that he's driven by a purpose in this film. That initially it's wealth, then it's prestige, then it's power, and then adoration, and then when he gets to the old man and he's an alcoholic and he's alone, and he's burnt all his bridges, he's destroyed all of his relationships. There's one thing he has left to do, and that's to humiliate Paul Dano's priest character, Eli Young, where he just is like, I need to humiliate, and fortune causes it because, of course, he comes cap in hand to Daniel Day-Lewis's character, but the way that he humiliates him, and of course does the "I drink your milk" sake. It's all about the fact that he doesn't just need to humiliate; he needs to make it the most degrading experience, and then of course he murders him, and it's just like, oh, okay. So, and of course that's the point, the end of the film, where his manservant comes in, having heard the commotion, and he says, "I'm finished," because he is. He's finished. He's done everything he wants to do. He achieved all the objectives in his life, and so you can't even call it a tragedy. I suppose you could call it maybe a tragedy of spirit. The idea that this man almost sold his soul. This is very Faustian. He sold his soul for oil. And everything he does from that point on is in service of the oil and in service of his goal. And then once he's achieved his goal, he has no function. He's done. He's finished. He's achieved everything he wants to. And so it's not tragic because he does he does the things he wants to do, and he's very happy to have completed all the things. But again, happy is possibly not the right word, because joy is gone from him. He is this nothing of a person. He's a wraith at this point. In some ways, it's funny really, because actually it harkens more to The Man Who Fell to Earth and the ending of The Man Who Fell to Earth. The way that society chips away at you until you become this embarrassment, this alcoholic shadow person who just rattles on until you don't. And okay, like I say, in this case, he had one more thing to do, and then he did it. And as I say, it's an interesting film. It's very long. Now, I think the problem I have with the Paul Thomas Anderson stuff is the fact that it's, this film wanted to be an epic, and I get it. He wanted, like I say, he's harking back to almost a transition out of the Western into the next stage, and he's almost making like a Western epic, but this is almost like a prospector epic. And it earns it. You by the time you get to the end of the film, you've seen this man go through this huge journey that charts like 30 years. But it is such a long film. And I get it, the cinematography is beautiful, and you need that sense of the land, and the sense of, everything. It's about the land, and the oil, and the sort of rivers of oil. But, again, you have to really love this to want to sit through the 3 hours of it. And like Phantom Thread, I definitely much prefer this to Phantom Thread. Sorry, I want to lead off with that. But I just don't know if I was... I definitely found myself more, dare I say, bored than not. And I just wasn't necessarily connecting for a lot of it. Oh, another Paul Thomas Anderson film I've seen is The Master, which actually, thinking about it, that's my first film, which I was really excited to see. And again, it has that same style. I do wonder if I go back to Boogie Nights or Punch Drunk Love, whether that has a very different tone to it, because it's like a decade earlier. And I'm curious to see whether he still has this same... There's just a style... There's almost like a separation. And I think that's the trouble. You, as an audience, constantly perceive these characters through glass. And once you go from There Will Be Blood, you get it a little bit. You really get it from The Master, and it's like a 6-foot glass wall between you and the characters of Phantom Thread. And I wonder, he obviously intends that, that is an intention, but I wonder if that's something I struggled with. And the thicker the glass, the harder it is to relate, the less I connect with it. I don't think this is my favourite performance from Daniel Day-Lewis. I still think Gangs of London, there's something about that performance. Gangs of New York, not Gangs of London. But I do appreciate, like I say, there are moments and layers in this performance that I objectively will appreciate, and I understand why people praise this performance as being his best, because there is so much layers and nuance and meaning to it, and there are themes and ideas that are well beyond my short video to be able to go into, that I'm sure entire books are written about, and it's all in this performance. So I appreciate, like I say, I appreciate this film. I just don't think I necessarily enjoy this film. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you liked this video, please hit the like button, comment below, and share the video because it's all helping the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded, and check out my back catalogue of over 200 videos. And follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.